Hi, it's Thomas from Smart Edition Academy. In today's video, we're reviewing an Accuplacer reading practice exam. You can take a full-length Accuplacer practice test by using the link in the description below. In the description, you will also find our link to our Accuplacer online study course, which has everything you need to prepare for the Accuplacer exam. In this video, I will review each question one by one with you and explain the correct answer. That said, let's get started. All right, question one, and a few things to note before we get into the question. If you are on the Accuplacer and you see a passage, which there will be a few, you always start with the question. Never read the passage first, because remember, this is a timed test. You may not have enough time to read the whole thing. Those minutes add up, everybody. So read the question first. Know what they, the test writers, want you to find in here, because it's usually something very specific, and it's something that we're going to practice throughout this test to save you some time. Let's see how this works. First, note the category, evaluating and integrating data. So let's look at the question. Which of the following is the best title for this passage? Okay, very straightforward question. A visit to a bookstore, the science of growing gills, a refuge in fiction but not fact, or the best science fiction of the year. The correct answer is C, a refuge in fiction but not in fact. Okay, so how do we understand that? How do we know this without having to read the whole passage? Well, the first thing you have to do when approaching a question like this is take note of each answer choice. So this one is just about, okay, we're going to the bookstore. Okay, so this one's very scientific. This one's talking about two things, fiction and fact, and this one's talking about just science fiction. So break down each answer choice in your mind before taking a look at the passage. And what you're going to want to do is really start at the beginning. If the question doesn't tell you where to look in a passage, always start with the first sentence. It's a good place. Every time I visit the bookstore, I find new science fiction title about post-apocalyptic survivors taking refuge in New York City's subway tunnels. Okay, so with this first sentence, we know we're going to a bookstore, we know there's science fiction, and we know there's something about subway tunnels. Okay, since we're still up in the air about which one's going to be correct, we're going to have to skim. And when you're skimming, don't read closely. Look for key words, key ideas that are going to help you get the right question. So let's skim, see what we can find out. Okay, so these stories are fun to read, but they're not plausible. Okay, so what's going on there? If society collapses, the subway tunnels won't be there anymore, or at least not for long. Huh. That sentence alone, actually that phrase, gives us our answer. Because we talk about science fiction in the beginning, but it says, hey, wait a minute, those stories, they're fun, but they're not real. The subway tunnels aren't going to be there for you and me to use in a post-apocalyptic society. So for that reason, that's why C is the correct answer. A refuge in fiction, but not in fact. Because, yeah, the people in the stories, they take refuge in the subways, but that's not how it's going to actually work in real life. And that's why C is the correct answer. Okay, let's go on to question 2. Okay, same passage. We know a little bit about it already, so let's take a look at the question. Which graphic element would most clearly illustrate the author's point? A schematic showing the depth and volume of all New York City subway tunnels, a graph comparing the ridership of New York City subways with those of other major American cities, a table showing how much water runs through the New York City subway system in varying conditions, or a New York City subway map showing emergency exits and detailing procedures for exiting the system during a flood. All very in-depth answer choices. The correct answer in this case is C, a table showing how much water runs through the New York City subway system. How do we know that? Well, we've already read these first two sentences, so we know the answer isn't there. If we look at our next sentence, we get the answer. On a typical day in a functioning New York City, a crew of engineers works round the clock to pump about 13 million gallons of water out of the subway system, and a major rain event pushes that number up fast. You may not know this, but subways are obviously built under the ground. They're built under the water table. So if there weren't pumps down there, it would fill up with water. So the reason C is correct, because if we had a graphic to show us how much water was actually running through the system, because who knows how much 13 million gallons is? I can't even imagine that myself. So if we had a picture for that, it would make us think, oh, okay, this is a huge issue that New York City engineers have to deal with every day to make sure people can get from their home to their job and back safely. So if we had a picture of this, it would give us a lot of information, especially if we didn't know how much 13 million gallons of water was. So as far as the others are concerned, because distractors, sometimes they can trip you up. Now, this one here has nothing to do with water, so we know it's incorrect. Same here, nothing about water. And also, D, this one does talk about water in a flood, but remember, the point of the essay isn't about emergency exits. It's not about what happens in day-to-day life. It's about what if the system disappeared? What if there was a post-apocalyptic event where people were trying to find refuge? So C is the best answer because it gives us a visual about something that most people don't understand right away. Okay. Question 3. Same passage, still talking about tunnels. Which information would belong in a sidebar alongside this text? So a sidebar is a little rectangle or a square that has a little bit of extra information, something that complements the main passage. So let's take a look at our options and find the right one. An illustration showing how a family of people might look if they all had gills behind their ears. A description of a subway's electrified third rail and an explanation of how it works to power trains. A list of science fiction novels about people living in subway tunnels in a post-apocalyptic world. Or a description of the job qualifications of a subway engineer who works the pumps to keep the tunnels functional. The correct answer is C, a list of these science fiction novels about people living in subway tunnels. Now, why is this correct? Well, part of the answer is here in the first sentence. It's about the author's experience about finding these new books. Now, you and me, we may not know about these novels. We may not know the authors or the titles. So if we had this information, we could look at it and think, hey, after I get done reading this, let me check out some of this information, some of these books about this topic. Because what it does, if we had it, it would help the author's point that, yeah, there's a lot of these novels out there. Now, if we look at our distractors, B and D are related to the passage, but they don't get to that key idea of people living underground in these post-apocalyptic novels. So even though it's good information, B and D are incorrect. Now, A is a funny distractor. It's incorrect because, well, the point of the passage is that people couldn't live underground, and they couldn't survive there anyway, so this one really makes no sense, even though it's mentioned here in the very last sentence about, well, you'd have to grow gills if you were going to live in the subways because they'd be flooded. It's a very small detail, and for that reason, it wouldn't be a good way to have a sidebar. It wouldn't be good information for a sidebar because the author's basically using it as a joke. It's not serious. So, that said, if we knew about the science fiction novels, we could go look at them and learn more about the author's point of view and their reason for writing this passage. Okay? Question 4. Okay, we got a bar graph, and we have a new category, summarizing text and using text features. The bar graph below provides information about book sales for The Cummings, the first book in a trilogy. Study the image and answer the following question. As always, we're going to start with a question. What type of book has sold the most copies? Ebook, hardcover, paperback, or audiobook? The correct answer is C, paperback. Now, let's take a look at this graph. Well, look, there it is. It's a very obvious answer. Paperback has the highest bar in the bar graph. Number sold, 30,000, much higher than the others. Now, it's a simple bar graph, but always check what the y-axis is measuring. Because, yeah, in this case, it says number sold, and we get the right answer. But what if it actually said number unsold? If you weren't paying attention, you would still see the highest part of the highest bar, paperback, and you would choose it, and you would be wrong in that case, because it would be measuring something else. So always look at what the y-axis is actually measuring, because they can trick you up that way if you're not paying attention. But in this case, it's a simple question with a simple answer. Paperback selling the most. Okay? Question 5. Yep, question 5. The marketing director for the Cummings wants to use a different strategy for publishing book 2 in the series. Which argument does the bar graph best support? The first book in the trilogy has only sold 10,000 copies. The second book in the trilogy should not be released in hardcover. The second book in the trilogy should only be released as an ebook. Or the second and third books in the trilogy should be combined into one. The correct answer is B. The second book in the trilogy should not come out as a hardcover book. Now, to get this answer right, we have to think about which statement does the graph actually support. And in this case, we see hardcover, along with audiobook, sold the least. So it would be a good idea not to release it hardcover, because people obviously prefer ebooks and paperbacks, and printing all of these would waste a lot of money. Okay, let's say you come across a question like this, and you're having a bit of trouble answering it. Now, let's use process of elimination to get rid of the other answer choices and help you out if you do have trouble. Now, we know A is obviously wrong because paperback alone sold 30,000 copies, so 30,000, 10,000, 20,000, 10,000. This one's obviously incorrect. C is incorrect because paperback sold more than ebook. Paperback seems to be the way to go. And D, although the author may want to do this, there is nothing in the graph that supports this conclusion about combining two books into one. There's no connection whatsoever. So if you're having trouble on a question, any question on the Accuplacer, use process of elimination to help you out. Okay? So let us move on to question number 6. It looks like we have a new passage and we have a new category. Understanding the author's purpose, point of view, and rhetorical strategies. As always, we're going to look at the question first. The purpose of this passage is to decide, inform, persuade, or entertain. The answer is persuade. Now, we have a relatively short passage here, so in this case, you're going to both skim it, and if you're a stronger reader, I would advise you to actually read it a little more in depth. It's just depending on how comfortable you are with reading or how fast of a reader you are. So, how do we know it's persuade? Let's take a look at what we actually have here. Wiseware Gear provides you with the cutting-edge technology to enhance your performance and optimize your training. Wiseware products include sensors to track your heart rate, activity level, and calorie burn during workouts. Information is automatically uploaded to your phone and organized so you can track your improvement over time with just the tap of a screen. If you've ever seen a television commercial, you might get the feeling that this sounds like a script for a product. And you'd be absolutely right in this case. The author of this advertisement, whether it be something someone says on TV or on the internet, they're trying to get you to buy Wiseware products to help you become healthier, maybe build some muscle. They're trying to persuade you to buy their product. So if you can understand the tone of what the author is doing from the first paragraph, you know that automatically. And if you look at the two smaller paragraphs here, they're actually going more in depth. Hey, it's not only useful, like we've seen up here, it's also a comfortable product. Okay, a little more persuasion. And look at this down here. An ultra marathoner named Uri Schmidt uses our product. If a famous person uses it, hey, you should too. And that's why persuades the correct answer. All right. Still talking about Wiseware. And with which statement would the author of this passage likely agree? Americans who work out put too much emphasis on performance and not enough on enjoyment. People who do not buy high-end exercise gear do not deserve to get a good workout and stay healthy. The best way to achieve a healthy body is to follow a simple exercise plan and avoid hyped-up gadgets. Or consumers want help pushing their bodies to the limit and gathering information about their exercise performance. The correct answer in this case is D. Consumers want help pushing their bodies to the limit and gathering information about their exercise performance. When it comes to answering a question like this, we have to think about what the author's point of view is. Their product, Wiseware, is trying to solve a problem. Any product you buy, they present to you a problem, and here's the solution the product solves. This is how the product solves that problem. And this is the problem here. Consumers, hey, they want to be better athletes. They want to know how their body's responding to their exercises. And you know what? Wiseware does just that. There are sensors. There's a readout on your phone or on your watch or something, and it's going to tell you how to be a better athlete and become healthier. So when it comes to that right answer, again, let's take a brief moment, get rid of some of the distractors. Because if you're struggling on this, I want to make sure that if you can get rid of one or two answer choices, your chances of guessing the right answer go up a ton. Okay, so let's start actually with A. There's really nothing here about enjoyment in exercise because we don't see the word enjoyment, we don't see any word that would be a synonym for enjoyment, so we can get rid of A. Well, B actually has a very negative tone. We don't see a negative tone here, so we can get rid of B. And C, it's the most unbelievable distractor because avoid hyped up gadgets, that's what Wiseware is. It's a gadget. So this goes against what the author's trying to do, making you buy Wiseware. So using that process of elimination can help you get the right answer too. Okay, question 8 coming up. Still talking about Wiseware. Which detail from the passage, if true, is factual? So which one's an actual fact? Wiseware transforms the user into a better and more informed athlete. Wiseware gear is the most comfortable exercise clothing on the market. Wiseware products contain sensors that track the user's body signals. Wiseware users are expected to improve at their sport over time. Correct answer is C. How do we know this? Well, since we've already taken a look at the passage, let's look at these individual sentences. The thing that makes A, B, and D incorrect is because they're all claims the advertisement is making. They are claiming that you will be a better and more informed athlete. They are claiming that everything else on the market is less comfortable. And they're also claiming that you're supposed to do something. We don't know if you're going to do that or not. The only thing we know that could be true is that, yeah, Wiseware products have sensors that relay information to your phone about how your body is reacting to exercise. That is a 100% fact. What you do with that information and how the clothes feel on you, that's all subjective. That's all things that could be different from person to person. So for those reasons, C is the correct answer. Question 9 coming up. I'm still talking about Wiseware. The author of the passage includes details about Wiseware's comfort and ease of use in order to appeal to readers' reason, trust, feelings, or knowledge? The correct answer is C, feelings. Now, we know this is an advertisement. We've known that for a few questions. A persuasive advertisement typically targets our emotions. By targeting our emotions, they attempt to build trust with us as consumers. Now, because we are talking about feelings, we know that reason and knowledge are incorrect, because advertisements, they go for the heart, so to speak. Now, I mentioned the word trust a moment earlier. Why isn't trust correct? Because if we appeal to feelings, we build trust with a brand later. Maybe it's a car, maybe it's a television, a company that makes televisions. So we get an appeal to emotion, and over time, that builds trust. So you start here, which we need to do to appeal to feelings, and only later do we build trust. And that's why trust is incorrect, even though it sounds right. Hopefully that explanation helped. Appealing to the feelings first, everybody. Okay, question number 10 coming up. I'm still talking about Wiseware. The author most likely includes the detail about a famous ultra-marathoner in order to make readers understand that Wiseware gear is factually the best on the market, take a weak position when they attempt to argue against the point, trust that scientists have really studied Wiseware gear and proven it worthy, or feel an association between Wiseware products and a person they admire. Correct answer is D. Feel an association between Wiseware products and a person they admire. This is a classic advertising technique that's been around for probably a century at least. If you associate a famous person with a product, someone will look at that product and think, hey, if I buy that, maybe I can be a little bit more like that actor or that athlete. The classic example is the Wheaties box at the grocery store. For decades, they've put famous athletes on their boxes, and kids and adults look at that and say, hey, that's what a healthy person eats. That's what someone who wins gold medals at the Olympics eats. So it's the exact same tactic they're using in the final sentence of this ad. We're bringing in a real person, someone famous, and the implicit promise is, if you buy this, you'll be a little bit better because you're going to be a little bit more like the person you admire. And that's it. Okay, coming up, question 11. Okay, looks like we have a brand new passage, and we're still talking about main ideas, topic sentences, and supporting details. Which sentence is the topic sentence? What if this causes similarly drastic changes to the world we call home? A global temperature change of a few degrees is more significant than it may seem at first glance. It takes a vast amount of heat energy to warm every part of our world, including oceans, air, and land, by even a tiny measurable amount. In the last ice age 20,000 years ago, when much of the northern hemisphere was buried under huge sheets of ice, median global temperatures were only about 5 degrees Celsius lower than they are now. The correct answer in this case is B. A global temperature change of a few degrees is more significant than it may seem at first glance. Now, how do we know this? A topic sentence within a short paragraph like this is the sentence that says, hey, this is what this paragraph's all about. And where do we find that? Usually at the very beginning. And here it is. This is the correct answer. It lets us know what we're going to be reading about, that, hey, if our planet becomes a little bit warmer or just a little bit cooler, that's a really big deal. And it's going to use the rest of the paragraph to describe why that's the case. So keep that in mind. Topic sentences, if it's a short paragraph like this rather than a big essay, it's going to be right at the beginning. That's your best strategy for getting a question like this correct. Okay, question 12 coming up. Still talking about temperature change, it seems. In the paragraph above, global temperature change is the topic, the main idea, the supporting detail, or the topic sentence. The correct answer in this case is A. It is the topic. Remember, a topic is the focus. While the main idea, it hasn't shown itself yet. Global temperature change is something that the passage discusses, but the main idea, as we saw earlier in our topic sentence, the main idea is that a little change either way can have big consequences. So don't get the two things confused. Global temperature change is what we're talking about. It's a topic, but the main idea is the second half of the first sentence. Supporting details come later, as we will see in further questions. And remember, D is obviously incorrect because these three little words aren't a sentence. So you can just get rid of D if you're having trouble deciding between A and B, let's say. If you can get rid of one, your chances of getting the right answer by guessing, like I've said before, they just shoot up so much. So, topic. Main idea is over here. Topic is here, global temperature change, and the main idea is over here on the last part of the first sentence. Okay, question 13 coming up. Which sentence summarizes the main idea of the paragraph? A small change in weather at any one location is a serious problem. The author is manipulating facts to make global warming sound scary. People should be concerned about even minor global temperature changes, or it takes an enormous amount of energy to warm the Earth even a little. The correct answer in this case is C. People should be concerned about even minor global temperature changes. How do we know this? And how do we get the right answer without having to read the whole paragraph in depth and potentially waste time that we may need for another question? Okay, so remember how an essay works, even if it's a little essay like this, which is only one paragraph. If you remember an English class you took, let's say, in high school, or maybe you're already in college, the professor or teacher is always going to say, hey, at the end of your essay, wrap it up, tie everything back together, reinforce your main idea. So let's take a look at our last sentence, see if that helps us. What if this causes similarly drastic changes to the world we call home? And we're actually going to take a little bit further back because we need to know what we're talking about. Scientists predict a temperature rise of 2 to 6 degrees Celsius by 2100. What if this causes similarly drastic changes to the world we call home? Okay, so scientists are saying the world's going to be hotter, and we're left with this question that sounds kind of ominous. It sounds a little scary, actually. So they're using scientific data, so we know it's scary, but we're not manipulating facts because we're using the scientific data, so we know B is incorrect. We don't see anything about A, about this idea, or the same thing with D. We have a question that's posed to us that is supposed to make us concerned about these global temperature changes that might be coming up. So even though it's scary, we do have evidence to back it up, and nothing about A or D shows up at the end when the author is tying together their main idea as part of their conclusion. So always look for that at the beginning or the end, like I said, especially the end, because that's what you're supposed to do in an essay or a short essay, is tie it all back together with a main idea. So always look there first, at the end, if you get a question like this, and then if you have to, like we did, look up maybe one or two more sentences so you can really get a picture of what a good summary might be of the passage. Okay, question 14. Okay, we're still talking about global warming, it seems. What function does the information about temperature differences in the last ice age play in the paragraph? Topic, opinion, main idea, or supporting detail? Correct answer is D, supporting detail. How do we know this? Well, first thing we're going to do, because it tells us where to look, that's exactly what we're going to do. Okay, last ice age. Let's highlight this paragraph. This sentence. In the last ice age 20,000 years ago, when much of the northern hemisphere was buried under huge sheets of ice, mean global temperatures were only about 5 degrees Celsius lower than they are now. Now, we know this passage is about how temperature differences can cause big effects. Even little temperature differences can. 5 degrees Celsius doesn't seem like a lot, so even then, northern hemisphere is buried under a lot of ice, even with such a small amount of cooling. For that reason, this is a supporting detail. It supports the main idea, and the main idea, remember, is small temperature changes can have big effects. It's obviously not an opinion, and also it's obviously not the topic, because we know the topic is global temperature change. That was one of our previous questions. So remember, supporting details, as the name suggests, they support the main idea. If you're writing a 5-paragraph essay, for instance, in your body paragraphs, that's where you're going to put the supporting details, that evidence you may have to research online or from a book. So keep that in mind, and you should have no problem on a question like this. Okay, question 15, still talking about temperature change. Which sentence would best function as a supporting detail in the paragraph? Okay, we know what a supporting detail is. We've seen an example of it right here. Which one would also help in the same way? Electricity and heat production create 1/4 of all carbon emissions globally. The world was only about 1 degree cooler during the Little Ice Age from 1700 to 1850. China has surpassed the United States as the single largest producer of carbon emissions, or methane emissions are, in some ways, more concerning than carbon dioxide emissions. The correct answer in this case is B. The world was only about 1 degree cooler during the Little Ice Age from 1700 to 1850. There's a really easy way to get this question right. If we look at this piece of this supporting detail here, it talks about a time in the past, it talks about what happened at that time, and it gives us a temperature difference. This correct answer does this exact same thing. It says a couple hundred years ago, it was 1 degree cooler, and it caused even then a little ice age, which actually did happen. There wasn't massive glaciers around the world, but the growing season for food was shorter. People went hungry. There was snow in the summer. It was like that. So it does the exact same thing as our example that's already in the paragraph. A, C, and D are all about global warming. They're all relevant to the conversation. But remember, always go back to your first sentence. A global temperature change of a few degrees is more significant than it may seem at first glance. This is the only answer choice that directly goes back to the topic sentence. So you can always use the topic sentence to reference your answer choices as well to make sure that they align correctly, and obviously get rid of the ones that don't. Okay? Keep that in mind. Question 16. Okay, category, facts, opinions, and evaluating an argument. Read the passage below and answer the question. What assumption behind this passage reflects negative stereotypical thinking? Ooh, okay. Question 16. Let's take a look at our answer choices. Public school teachers are generally overworked and underpaid. Students with learning disabilities are not engaged in their education. Laws require teachers to provide accommodations to certain students. Or teachers have a finite amount of attention to divide between students. The correct answer for number 16 is B. Students with learning disabilities are not engaged in their education. Now, if we only have this much to go on, we might as well take a look at the whole thing. Let's look at this whole little 2 sentences, actually. Overworked public school teachers are required by law to spend extra time implementing individual educational plans, also known as IEPs, for students with learning and attention challenges. This shortchanges children who are actually engaged in their education by depriving them of an equal amount of individualized attention. Now, the first sentence is factual. I'm a former public school teacher, and during that time I worked with many students who had IEPs. These legal documents say how I was to modify their instruction and their assessment to accommodate their either physical disability or a learning disability. Now, this is factual. There's nothing negative in this sentence, and there's nothing stereotypical about it. It's in the second sentence we find our correct answer. This shortchanges children who are actually engaged in their education by depriving them of an equal amount of individualized attention. It's making a very extreme claim that children with IEPs, students with IEPs, do not want to be educated. Someone walking into a classroom, for instance, who knew nothing about education, I would assume the writer is one of these people, would look at a student with a disability and see them struggle and think, well, this person doesn't want to be here. And for that reason, B is the correct answer, because it makes a very negative assumption about students with learning disabilities. Now, going on that, we know that sentence A, we know that teachers are overworked. That's what it's implied here, which is true. We know that from here too. Sentence 1, it supports this, so it's not negative. And yes, teachers do have a finite amount of time, a finite amount of attention to divide between students. I was in that situation many times. It's tough. So A, C, and D are true statements. There's nothing negative inherently about them. It's only when the second sentence comes up, we have this extreme claim. It's very negative against children with disabilities, and it's stereotypical because people who walked into a classroom and would see these children or young adults struggling, they would think they don't want to be here, they don't deserve it, blah, blah, blah. So for those reasons, B is the correct answer. Okay, 17. All right, we're still looking at these two little sentences, and let's take a look at our question. The above argument is invalid because the author suggests that some students do not need as much attention because they learn the material more quickly, uses belittling and disrespectful word choice to describe people who think, learn, and process information differently, describes public school teachers in a negative way that makes it seem as though they have no interest in helping students, or professes an interest in equality for all students while simultaneously suggesting that some students are more worthy than others. Correct answer in this case is B. Uses belittling and disrespectful word choice to describe people who think, learn, and process information differently. Now, in our second sentence that we analyzed in our previous question, the word choice the author uses makes students with special needs seem like lesser than their peers. It implies that a student with normal or above average intelligence is more deserving of a teacher's time than a student who struggles with a coursework, a student who has an IEP or a student that has an IEP for a physical or mental disability. So we see the disrespectful word choice. This phrase here, who are actually engaged in their education, it's a slap in the face, to be honest, to these students who need extra help because the law says they do. Okay. Let us move on from 17 to 18. Okay, looks like we got a graphic. Let's see what our category is. Understanding primary sources, making inferences, and drawing conclusions. Study the infographic below and answer the following question. Because it's an infographic and not a paragraph, do take a moment just to browse the top and the biggest words so you have a general idea of what you're looking at. We know our topic is screen time versus lean time. Okay, we see the average youth, 15 to 18, spends about 7.5 hours a day in front of a screen. That's a lot. And with that, let's go down. Since those are our two big things, we know a little bit. Let's go down to our question now. Which of the following of the infographic's features does not add to its credibility? Is it the use of verifiable facts, the list of source materials, the professional appearance, or the inclusion of the author's name? The correct answer in this case, everyone, is C, the professional appearance. Now, how do we get that? Let's look at our word here, credible. When something's credible, you know it has good information that you can trust. So, we're looking for the one feature that it's giving us. That doesn't tell us that it's a credible source. If something uses verifiable facts, facts that we can look up and prove that they're true, that's credible. So that adds to credibility. If you list the source materials, like they've done here, yeah, that gives us another way to research whether the facts are true and adds to the credibility. An author's name, hey, that author might be a PhD, they might be a medical doctor, someone who is making a claim about how much time kids should spend on the computer or their phone, should have a background in pediatrics, in children's health, perhaps. So if we know they're a doctor, that adds credibility. Now, professional appearance, which this has, anything can have a professional appearance. I could make something that looks just as good as this and fill it with the worst lies you could ever imagine. So a professional appearance by itself does not add to credibility, although having a professional appearance sure is nice, especially when the good old Centers for Disease Control is putting out a poster. So keep that in mind. Professional appearance by itself does not make something more credible. Okay, moving on. Same poster. Let's take a look. Zeta is unsure of the credibility of this source and has never heard of the Centers for Disease Control, the CDC, right here. Which fact could help her decide to trust it? The CDC is located in Atlanta. The CDC has a .gov web address, that means .government. The CDC creates many infographics, or the CDC is also listed as a source consulted. The correct answer in this case, everyone, is B. The CDC has a .gov web address. Now, I want you to think back maybe to the latest English class you took. That might be last year, that might be a few years ago, maybe more than a few years. If you were growing up in the time of the internet, or when the internet existed, a teacher probably told you, hey, if you're writing an essay and you're looking up sources, I want you to only use .edu or .gov web addresses. And the reason they told you that is because .edu or .gov usually have very credible information. Very smart people are writing up that information and other people are fact-checking them. And that's why they're good resources. So, if we see that it has a .gov web address, we know that this is an official government document and it is going to be, hopefully at least, credible. Now, where an organization is and how many infographics it produces really have nothing to do about whether you should trust something. Now, yes, the CDC actually uses one of its own resources, but any organization could do that. An organization that was telling the worst lies ever could cite itself to make you think, oh, well, there's a citation that must be true. Well, if they're citing their own lies, you see, it's not going to be trustworthy at all. So, if you see a .gov, it's going to be trustworthy, more often than not. Okay. Okay, last question. What could a skeptical reader do to verify the facts on the infographic? Ask a teenager about his or her daily screen time, review the research study the infographic cites, check a tertiary source like Wikipedia to verify the info, or find different values for screen time on someone's personal blog. The correct answer in this case is B. Review the research study the infographic cites. Okay, how does this work? Well, let's say you're on the CDC website, you find this, and you see the resources. And hey, look, there's a link to a research study. I click on that, I can see what the scientists actually found out, I can review the data, and if that data says the same thing as the infographic, the poster, I know for a fact that the CDC is telling me the truth. So, yeah, I could ask a random teenager about how long they're on the computer or their phone, but that's just one example. That could be different from another teenager. So asking one person's not going to help you figure out the truth. If you've ever been in an English class in the last 20 years or so, you might hear that your teacher doesn't want you to use Wikipedia to verify the information, because anyone can change Wikipedia. That's gotten better in the last few years, but at the same time, you want to go back to the actual source. Wikipedia shouldn't be your go-to place just yet to see if something's true or not. And lastly, well, finding different values on a personal blog, everybody, is just someone's opinion. And they could be making up the facts. You don't know if that's true or not. They may not be a doctor. They may never even talk to a teenager in their entire life. So that said, if you look at the actual research study, one that was done by doctors and research scientists, that's going to help you figure out the truth. So keep that in mind if you get a question like this on the Accuplacer. Okay, let's finish the test section and see how we did. Well, congratulations to me, it seems. It looks like I got 100. Now, in your case, if you take your first practice test, or let's say you take the Accuplacer for the first time at your school, you may not get the perfect score. Before we finish up, let me give you one piece of important advice, being a former teacher and someone who's taught test prep in the past. When you see your results on our practice test, or any practice test, take a look at your category with the lowest percentage first. Let's say, for instance, that instead of 100, I only got a 50 in understanding the author's purpose, point of view, and rhetorical strategies. That would be the place where I would focus my study time first. And if I had values that were larger, let's say this was 60 and that was 70, I would work my way up to these other categories. Always start with your worst subject first. That is always the best place to make a study plan and improve your score. Because if you can improve your score in one section a lot, especially if it's your worst section, that's going to help you raise your overall score the most. Trust me on this. I've helped a lot of students with this strategy, especially on standardized tests like the Accuplacer. Okay, that said, everybody, great job on hanging tight through this practice test for the reading section of the Accuplacer. As a reminder, you can take a full-length Accuplacer practice test by using the link in the description below. Check out the link in the description to find the Accuplacer online course for everything you need to study for the Accuplacer. Good luck on test day, and good luck with your journey to college.